And we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dark Council. Kind of late. We're on episode 6 now. Finally over all that Disney shenanigans. Never want to repeat that again. Um, and for tonight, we're kind of going back to politics. We're going to the idea of containment, how right wing parties in the West are just used to contain the true right wing energies in a nation. um, Now we're going to be getting into the ideas of power politics and the ideas of vanguardism that have been used kind of against the right, and kind of like what ideas we actually need to incorporate into at least our thought processes if we're true dissidents. All right, and introducing our guests, we have Prester John
Hello.
and Geo. All
Cricket,
right.
cricket, cricket, cricket.
Oh,
Oh shit, he left? God damn it.
oh, he Okay, guess he's having internet problems. Well, we'll just get into this then. Just me and Prester John.
No, let me start off for a sec. So, first things first. Honestly, I can't I actually missed the Disney thing. I had my whole anti-twisted rant, or no, tangled rant. It was tangled, but I guess you'll just never be able to hear that. So,
If you
um
really want to rant, like we can do
no,
it at
no,
the
no,
end.
no. Geo's back, so let's get back on. But
That'll
so
be the special
containment,
features at the
right?
end.
So,
All right.
I'll start off from the way all good uh, speeches and shit start off, which is talking about something completely unrelated. So, I have TISM, right? So, I'd always have like a speech or like a counselor or whatever they have in every school tell me, you have to be worried about your audience. Not everyone wants to hear about trains or whatever the fuck I was into, right? Because I'd constantly trying to, right? Talk about your audience, right? So we talk about right wing political discourse. We're talking about what is the audience? What is the unspoken assumptions of the audience of the American public opinion? Well, it's leftist. So, like, every conservative starts off and it's like, okay, so Martin Luther King was like totally like our guy. We're anti racist. We are for this, we're for that. So basically, up front, they concede the lion's share. They're trying to appeal to a leftist truth regime, right? So when you think about a rightist, right, a true like unreconstructed rightist, you think about they. Sometimes it sounds like they're like either they're talking to like a select few in the crowd, like the chuds, or it sounds like they're talking to no one because they're not speaking to the unspoken assumptions in the sense of conceding everything to the left. Like, while I'm not racist, it's like, no, we need to reject liberalism, right? And the only way you can direct something like that is with a group of people at the head of a movement who are like, yeah, actually, we're not, uh, we're like, we can't have like a bottom up in the sense of political action. It has to be right because we're dealing with that right now. So we have the disgruntled liberals. It's like, oh man, wokeness has gone too far. No, we're not anti-gay. We're not. We're and then it's the concessions. I was with you in 2008. Well, why aren't you now? Well, that's it. It's just because we went too far, and that right. So we need a vanguard of people to say, take the grassroots and put it in a direction, put it in an anti whatever direction. And the way it's constructed is that all the rightist parties or would be rightist parties are the opposite. They're not. They're well. Yeah, I don't want to give the whole swims to the left speech, but I'll give the floor to someone else because I basically got my main points out.
All right, Geo, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the root of the problem is that like the American project is liberal in nature. The majority of our founding fathers were very heavily influenced by the French Enlightenment thinkers, and I think it's hard to divorce that. And I think that explains why we have this vanguardism. Um the basically the peasant landed class, which is no longer a peasant landed class, has adopted ideologies and I guess the values of a watered down right wing liberal party essentially. And it's just funny because like the right wing will push for all these values in America, but won't do the work, right? Won't do the actual necessary work at a national level, institutional building, won't maintain the associations and institutions and grow them, create new ones, multiply them. This just isn't what's happening in America. So the right wing is functionally and just like the socialists at this point, right? Even the socialists are nothing but shills for the liberal paradigm at this point. And same as the conservatives at this point. So most conservatives, as long as they have this leave me alone mentality, right? So as long as they can barbecue and grill and watch football on Sundays, as long as they can have their own Christian little neighborhood, I think they don't care. And that's one of the reasons why we have this you know what they call ghost dancing, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and like this is going to be getting into the idea of like vanguardism, because like, and where does the term vanguardism come from? I mean, we're kind of stealing it from our political enemies, because it was originally like Lenin who, I mean, vanguards have existed in the past, but Lenin kind of like put it down in print, like, no, you need like an elite vanguard. If you're going to bring about any change, you need a concerted, willing elite who are willing to step in line and follow the commands and dictates of the leader. Oh, and we lost Prester John. Um, and like the right, they, especially in America, but like this is true now in a lot of the world that have been touched by America. Right wing parties, they tend to be the true believers in democracy. Like the biggest true believers in democracy tend to be like the Republican Party, or like the Tories in Britain, or like the CDU in Germany, and like all these right liberal, like they're essentially there just to contain the true forces of the right wing and like essentially keep them doped up. It's like the Republican Party was going to endlessly promise to get rid of abortion and never do anything on it, but then the Supreme Court had to act on its own. I'm not, well, all they did was overturn Roe v. Wade. They didn't like full stop ban abortion, but they got rid of that, and that's like something the Republicans were using to get reelected constantly because they never wanted to actually act on it. And like just like Preston John was saying, like the right always concedes to liberals, and like they default to the liberal idea and don't come in with their own presuppositions of no, we are right, like no, Christ is king or something. Like they don't have like their own mission statement. They just always are kind of like critiques of like absolute liberalism, but they're liberals themselves.
If I might chime in on that effect, it's like, so the truth regime, right? So like, you know how like Franklin FDR said like Hitler was anti-Christian in like the 30s or some shit. Oh, he's trying to abolish Christianity. And then like Hitler was like, no, I'm not trying to abolish Christianity. That's absurd. Okay, think of the parallel. Hitler was accused of being anti-something, anti-Christian, and then he had to deny it to save face. Think about that. That's literally what could. So conservatives, what is it now? Someone accuses us of being a Nazi. We're like, no, we're not. And let me like go out of my way to prove it to you. So think about it. So in the 1930s, you had a nominally Christian truth regime. You had to appeal to that. You had to be called on that. If someone said you're the spawn of Satan, you would either take it as an injury, like you punch them in the face, or you'd be like, no, of course not. What? Right? And now it's like, no, we're not a Nazi. So we can't always be doing that. So we need to like I said, like imagine a right winger walks into the room and he's like, we reject liberalism, we have to do this, and it's like, and the liberals in their head they're thinking, who's we, right? Because even if we're very reactionary, we're on the unspoken assumptions, right? Like I was talking about earlier, of right? It's like the unspoken assumptions is that when someone comes to the room and says they're not a Nazi, well, oh, okay, I guess he's one of us then. So we need like Lenin, right? We need a party. So Lenin was, we need an intellectual class of basically disenchanted, rich, educated kids who want to read Marx all day, and they need to rule a revolutionary government of working class, salt of the earth people. Well, we have a slightly different task. We need to take like the boomer. Why won't they just leave us alone? And we need to get the theory, the chud theory cells, and we need to be like, my fellow boomers. Hello, my fellow boomers. In order for you to be able to grill, you need to. I don't want to say anything too spicy, but like, we basically need to like repeal the 19th or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, we need to direct their, in and of itself, the political energy, just like the working class. The working class needs a party, if we're going to Marxist from Lenin's view. In order to become class conscious and to be politically directed towards something, the grassroots feeling of, man, them fat cats is, taking us, they robbing us left and right, and you need to direct that into political action with a elite vanguard, right? So we need to take, man, why they go put our kids in no trans bathrooms? We need to be like, the solution is trans. No, but like, so like radical, seemingly like crazy political action that just like makes the New York Times heads explode, right? That's like, and the solution is to read Bronze Age Mindset.
No,
That's
no,
where it starts.
I won't recommend BAP. That's just me.
Okay. I usually don't either, but Distributors recommended the book, so I mean, I'm gonna take it from Dave. Okay.
I mean, Dave is our Purple Emperor, so.
God save Dave.
Geo, anything you want to bounce back on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're talking about is I think you're referencing a counter elite earlier in the beginning of your statement. I don't know if we can expect that from the boomers, who would be the ones in position to be able to be a counter elite, right? To an extent. Maybe not even a aristocratic like elite, but not just even as a uh, just even a faction that can push back on a lot of these things, creating associations, creating political factions. I don't know if they even have it in them to do this, and the millennials are too young. We have some, right? We have some Gen Xers. Maybe if as Gen Xers maybe possibly become more conservative. I don't even know if that's a possibility, but if that would have to be like the next extension essentially of a counter elite.
I think it's all clear what we need. We need like Mao's little red book, but it's gonna either be like white or gold, and it's gonna have an ominous title similar to the little red book, and we're gonna pass it out to Zoomer neets and incels, and they're gonna be like directing the boomers to do like our, literally, we need right-wing Maoism now, okay?
So, to kind of go on that, like there's different types of elites. You kind of need a lot of different types. You need experts in various fields. Like say the right wing intellectuals would be like Lenin's cohort, like say the upper strata to lead the proletariat revolution. But then also like you're going to have like you want to have like artists. You want to have like military men. You want to have like military officers who are at least like ideologically sympathetic to you. You want to have like men in business and finance or like various other sectors and fields that can bring their elite talents to your movement. It's like I hate to bring up the mustache man, but he was really smart when doing this. It's like he brought on like men like Ernst Röhm, who was like he was a military officer and later Freikorps militia leader, and he became like the militant wing of the NSDAP. And like Hitler was like the charismatic speaker. I mean, Hitler was also was really intelligent and an artist, so he kind of had like that artist figure to him. But then he had like Joseph Goebbels to like direct the media of the party and like the newspapers and stuff. So like you need like all these talents, like you need all these different elites, like in a vanguard movement, and they need to kind of be in sync. Uh, Nobody detracted from like the absolute leader that you have over the vanguard. This leader sets the pace. Everyone else goes along with it, but brings their talents to the pool. Uh, like I'll have a link to my Substack. Uh, you're gonna have to reload the podcast after it's done airing, but I'll put a link down there to my Substack. I have an article about Gibelinism, and then I also have a chapter in my book that I'm releasing because I kind of want to be like that artistic elite for a dissident right. I want to like write books and like make media that I won't say is like right wing propaganda, but is like can give people like inspiration for like a different world, like a better world, or what
Yeah,
could be a better world.
someone who's read your book chapter, it's basically right wing propaganda.
Yeah. I mean, everything these days has been politicized. Like back in the day, my book would probably be like just a normal novel. But now today it's like it's called right wing propaganda. So
Yeah,
um
so the thing is with building of these institutions, someone has to do it first. And that person has to be someone um who is an ideas type of person who can institute a institution essentially. He has to build it up from the ground up with
mhm.
a group of people that he trusts. And the problem is in the past this was just tradition, right? So the German military tradition was passed down father to son, clan to clan, right? Clan all the way down. So we don't have that. We've lost that through the generations, and because we don't have that, someone has to build it again. Um, Even then, how do we even have uh the problem is it would take dozens or hundreds of people to literally make this into their lifestyle voluntarily to be aristocratic.
Mhm.
And if there's no institution keeping a check on that, maintaining that, um, it just becomes just as libertarian as the liberal dream, right? Oh, we're just gonna have random aristocrats come up and do it. Well, what happens when that family somehow falls, right? They lose all their wealth or something. Who's there to replace that? Oh, someone will eventually replace that. And during that time
Mhm.
where they're waiting for someone to replace that, unless a king is able to appoint the replacement or there is someone to appoint a replacement, what happens is you're just waiting for that vacuum to be filled eventually. And that is also what part of the liberal problem of deconstruction of the institutions.
Yeah, and I hate to bring up this guy Nick Fuentes. I don't really like to punch right, but he like his Groypers, like it was too based on anarchy. Like he did have like energy, he had spirit, and he was charismatic, but he was like the sole leader. Like there's no like leader of like America First besides him. There's no like sub commanders. There's no lieutenants. There's no even like NCOs to like direct to the Groypers. So it became an anarchic mess. Um,
Yeah, about Nick also, like he had his stalwarts, he had his like people that would pay for all the shit, fly him around the world because he was basically running on, other people's money and shit and donations or whatever. But then you couldn't even have the forethought and planning to like, I'm going to the former president's house with a erratic rapper. Maybe I should see with what Mr. Ye plans on doing. No, so there's no, so even if you have energy, even if you have loyalty and a political direction, you need like another part of like a vanguard, like a, because our best analogy, because it starts with Lenin, right? What does a communist party need? Well, it needs, like, you need the ability to like, what about this? Well, actually, no, that's a bad idea because this, and this theory, right? The same thing with like just general political, that's a dumb idea because whatever.
Yeah, like that's what like the Politburo was in like communist countries was the I mean the Politburo was purely party. It wasn't let's just say part of the state necessarily, but it effectively was part of the state. Where they set the course of the actual party and appointed the leaders of the party to direct the vanguard to bring about communism. Let's just say, like the Politburo voted on who was the head of the all-union Communist Party in the Soviet Union. That eventually elected like Stalin over Trotsky as the head. So like you kind of need like that. Like you need a grand council. You need a chain of command, and you need a very detailed chain of command. You can't just have like a few strata, and you need like an elite at every level that are meant to direct that level. Um, so like a grand council of the party generally is like we'll just say the highest initiated. Like they are the most knowledgeable. They are the most doctored in the theory.
The Council of Chuds and Theory Cells.
I mean, effectively. Geo,
Right-wing Politburo now.
Geo, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we generally agree on that. The problem is, what is it going to be informed on, and what is going to maintain the institutional structure in itself, besides the voluntary service of the individual families that tend to take up those services, right? So that's why
Yeah.
you need something overarching as an institution to be able to have the ability, like the British monarchy, to knight
Mm-hmm.
people, right? Or to knight the family into service, I guess. Um, you need some order of that. Otherwise, it just devolves into just through voluntary uh dissolution of the obligation over time as a family, even, right? Uh,
So
there's nothing to
I
maintain that. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah. So I mean, it kind of requires on like conditions. It's like, so why was Lenin not able to like take power prior to 1917? Because the conditions really weren't there. It's like the Russian peasant, he wasn't literally starving. Like, well, he had a decent life. If he just floated the boat, he could actually progress in the world. There wasn't a constant beating down upon him. And like the urban working class, the proletariat, and this is pretty much the same thing. Like, yes, they didn't have the safest work environments. Yes, they weren't paid the best, but they were still getting bread on the table. They still had stability. And like the vanguard party, like didn't really grow. The Bolsheviks weren't really much larger than like a school classroom full of men in like 1914. But because they constantly concerted effort, and when conditions got rougher, like honestly, conditions in the United States are going to get rougher. It's not going to be this blissful liberal, uh, let's just say utopia that it is right now. Like I hate to call the United States a utopia, but compared to what many people foresee with potential economic hardship, which is kind of like the presupposition you need for like a vanguardist movement to like take off. Like Hitler's movement was really popular in the early days because, well, National Socialism, it gave people like meaning, like all these disaffected youth who didn't have jobs, who didn't have like a future to look forward to. They were able to find themselves in this movement of men. But then after like the beer hall putsch, Like Weimar actually did like start its economy started to do well and all that. So then like most men fell away from like these vanguardist movements in Germany. But then like when the conditions got worse again, suddenly you saw these vanguardist movements promising like solutions, promising like actual like genuine change and genuine direction of the nation, with like a true spirit of action behind it. That's like when they came to the vanguardist movement. But then like Hitler, he stayed vigilant. Lenin, he stayed vigilant. He kept like his elite close to him, ready to act when those conditions were there.
This actually reminds me because both the answer to Gio's question, right? So, what holds the vanguard, or what holds the emergent elites together? Well, nothing before the revolution. It's like we're still on this Lenin as a model, which is kind of, if anyone listening, if that offends their sensibilities, then you're not in the right headspace. Okay, the final red pill is Lenin was Lenin was an evil genius, to be clear, but if we're so it's like, first there's like this, it's like Leninism, like that was described even in like, the old Charlemagne videos, like the introductory course to, dissident right or neo reaction, right? The thing is, what is it, right? So you have well, we're white straight Christians, so if we don't believe in this, we're effed, and then eventually a meritocratic state order develops after, right? So first, you're in the party because if the party loses, you lose. If the woke wins, we lose. Therefore, we're in the Chud party or whatever, right? The Chud Council, right? And then after that, after we've established our revolutionary Chud state, the Chud United States of America, then there can be like a solid legal basis for whatever elites have emerged in that process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like vanguardist movements are always really small. Like Lenin was very small. All these movements are very small, until they actually like had the conditions to gain power. And when they gained power, like they already were an elite. They established themselves as an elite, and they made themselves like be this elite that they could direct this new nation or this new regime. Um, and then they circulated the elites. Like this is a big thing. Like in elite theorist circles, like you need to circulate uh, your enemy elites out, and you need to put your guys in. Like even if they're like complete ideological hacks, like complete ideological hacks can still run a government. Like even if they're not like as great as like the liberal they replaced, uh, that liberal is not there subterfuging your new vanguardist regime. Which is also like another thing now, like why right wing parties in the West are pure containment is because guess what they do with all their supposed power every time they are given power? They never actually use it to cement it. Like the regime actually uses when they allow their own people to have power or their puppets, they cement power. They put people in the bureaucracies and the institutions, in education, in the media. They make sure all these places are filled with their people. But when the right supposedly has power, which I bet it's because they don't actually have real power and they're just containment, they don't circulate elites. They don't put their own guys in the bureaucracy to do the mission statement. They don't have like a concerted vanguard to come in. Like that's like the issue with right wing parties is they don't get people to come into these institutions, like to become teachers. Like yeah, like what do I hear from like right wingers in the United States? They never want to become teachers because it doesn't pay well. It's like, cry your crocodile tears. do you really want like purple-haired leftists over there to be the only person willing to be a teacher because they want to indoctrinate your kids? Like, no, you must indoctrinate the kids. You are the right-wing chud. Teach those kids to be right-wing chuds.
Well, to be fair to the people who don't want to invest too much time in the PTA, in some way, Gramsci had some points, but also Gramsci was basically it was an attempt of an explanation for why Lenin's model didn't work in the Western countries, and ultimately the answer is they weren't up against the wall as much. So ultimately, if we're talking like pure, we can't, like, the right wing can't do like a long march in the institutions, okay? Like, we're not going to like troll or trick leftists into like, oh yeah, these are one of us. No, someone's gonna slip. The tongue revealing your power level is like a hovering Damocles over your career at all times, right? But if you're talking about like just pure Leninism, like, you're disadvantaged, the party is offering, particularly all my young Zoomer white boys out here, a place in the world that isn't eating goy slop and shit like that, and working as a wagey and a cagey. Well then, we sort of have to lean, because we can't do a long march, so we have to lean into the line of Lenin. So yes, Leninism is base, guys. I'm sorry, the final red pill is finally here.
Yeah, and that's kind of like that's the thing we need to appeal to. It's like young men have this innate desire to be part of like a vanguard, of like an elite, of a just some sort of movement. Like, say, this is why like young men get like enamored by like the military, because it's seen as like these great men who have like a mission statement and they're going to go out and conquer or whatever. It's same with like vanguardist parties. Like, young men are innately attracted by the idea of like a mission and in life, a goal.
And to
Like,
that
Jonathan
effect, because right, so forgive me, but for interrupting, but it's also right. So, for example, Yarvin, what does he say? Like, the fascist dictatorship way isn't going to work. He's right in some sense. He's right in one sense, right? In the sense of like, what did the Nazis and the commies do? National Socialism, they had like the National Socialist Literature Club. They had everything. Everything was going to be stamped. We can't do it in that sense, right? We can't have the Chud Book Club and the Chud, right? So it's going to have to be, we can't name ourselves. Every membership organization, but like, for example, the basket weaving, or like the church communities, like the majority of the French and Russian revolutions was basically just a couple of revolutionary intellectuals and discouraged like normies talking in a coffee house. The majority of all the murders, the coups, all that shit was hashed out in a coffee house. Like, so, like the third place, touching grass, actually creating organic communities. I don't want to say anything too spicy, but you'd be surprised where that can get you.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, like Lenin, before he was exiled out of Russia the first time, he like they did meet in like social gatherings and made it look like just a social club. Like, there was this famous scene in the show called Fall of Eagles, which is based off a real event, where the early socialists, they just met in the shop, um, and they served pancakes to each other, as it was like an eating social that they disguised in case the police came. Um, and this is actually like where he met his wife as well. Like, Fall of Eagles is like surprisingly accurate in terms of portraying Lenin. But I mean, that's kind of like what it's what like a vanguard starts out as, like the basket weaving. It's like you have to you always do it as social clubs first, um, and you develop connections, and from those connections of like-minded revolutionaries, you kind of create like an informal network uh, of ideological sympathizers. Is that what you're trying to say, Prester John?
Yeah. Like Nick Fuentes, for all of his cringe, he basically like Identity Europe. I think it was Identity Europa. Was basically Nick just went up to the guy who founded it and said, like any membership organization can just get hit up with federal racketeering charges, right? Like that's how they got the mob in the 30s with the FBI. So you can't do like you can't have this is the insert blank reactionary party and this is the insert blank reactionary party's book club. This is our Hitler Youth or whatever you want to, the equivalent socialists wearing uniforms, Patriot Front, all that doesn't work. Yarvin was right about that. But informal, like the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, those were all basically informal, like social events. Yeah, like just imagine, the coffee hour after liturgy, right? And you're just around the table eating Greek cookies after mass, and then it's like someone that's like, "Hey, did you read any Spengler?" And then like someone does like a secret handshake. That's how it's, you know what I mean?
Yeah, or like Carl Schmidt or some sort of other spicy author. Gio, you kind of been silent. Do you have anything to go off this?
I mean, yeah, I think it's pretty obvious how to get what the process is, right? You either have to do a long march of the institutions, start influencing to use the neocon route, are
My
willing to sacrifice making. Do you guys not hear me?
I don't know if it was my internet, but it kind of sounded like somebody bugged out. Well, then there's Prester. You just bugged out. But go forth. I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, we need numbers, and that's something I think is missing on the conservative side, that it's getting I think I don't know how to revivify that enough to a point where people actually make it their mission to go into these institutions to replace a lot of these activists within these institutions. And even if we do have like conservatives go in right now, or people who are counter elite, the problem is we're also very heavily divided on the right. We have pagans, we have atheists, we have agnostics, we have Protestants, we have Catholics, etc. Um, and then different levels of these political ideologies. And I don't know what could be that unifying idea that could unite, centrists with libertarians with conservatives into a cohesive elite without just producing multiple counter elites in those institutions as well.
Hmm.
Well, if you'll
So
permit, right? So even like we're on Russia, we're on the Russian Revolution, well, or even the French Revolution. There were factions and but that's hashed out after it's said and done. After we've kicked out the current or ancien regime, right? The old regime. So,
Right, but
I
we're
think
talking about how the vanguardism on the right in America is one of its problem, but that vanguardism that we're referring to is the moderate centrist, libertarian, liberal
I
conservative
mean,
position takers, correct?
I
So
wouldn't.
even
I
if
don't
they,
even.
Mhm.
I
so
no. I think
I
that's the containment. The vanguardism is like what we're trying to shoot for. We want a
so like
vanguard, but we don't have one.
the difference between the vanguard and the normie. Like the vanguard are those willing to do those, let's just say, less than agreeable tasks, like say instigating protests, instigating riots. I'm not making a call to violence here. I'm just saying like this is what like Lenin would do. This is like what several vanguard organizations would do is that they'd be the ones to propel these actions into effect.
But no, because
And typically like I'm going to quote Jonathan Bowden quickly about vanguardism because he had this great speech on YouTube. You can still find it on YouTube, Jonathan Bowden, Vanguardism. It should come up. But he talked about like how you don't necessarily need like your vanguard to be like conforming to the main demographic. Like say, what was the main like cohort of the BNP or the British National Party while it was still around in Britain? Well, they were mostly Catholics. Like they didn't conform to the religious majority of England. Like 90% of them were Catholics, which was odd for Britain, especially in British politics. Well, then, like say in America, like the Black Panthers, like and Malcolm X, like what are they the Black Muslims? Like they didn't conform to like the average African American who's like a Southern Baptist. So like these vanguard groups, they did perpetuate their own groups' self-interest, even though they were a minority within their own group. And like the vanguard for like so like Jonathan Bowden typically says like the normie will like publicly denounce the vanguard. Like he'll always publicly denounce the vanguard, but he'll like quietly smirk and like in his mind agree with what they stand for. Like even if he can't endorse it publicly.
Like you brought up Nation of Islam, like Martin Luther King denied vociferously. Oh yes, nonviolence. The people in his what was it, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which was basically a communist front. I bet all of my life savings, which admittedly isn't much. Like if you want $200, brother, you can have it, right? But no, but right, that behind those closed doors, they're like, oh yes, brother Malcolm. Once we lull the white middle class, then we will destroy all, something like that. I don't know, right? So, but I think we've kind of made the every point that can reasonably be made about vanguardism. I kind of wanted to circle back to containment, if that's okay, because I feel like we could really get into more like how the right wing political sphere kind of like leads to containment. So like it's smugness, number one. It's like the Bud Light thing, and everyone's like, haha, go woke, go broke, and then they just do it. Like it's like, okay, the smugness, that's number one. That's like that sort of self-assuredness, like it's a joke, like it can be laughed away. It's not funny anymore. Like I'm still laughing because we're basically like all like the Joker, but haha, right? But it's not funny, right? So like the smugness, like the idea of like it's of right-wing politics as like a meme or consumer product, or like how every time a celebrity or a comedian will like appeal to us just a little bit, we'll be like, oh my god, he's so based. Case in point, Dave Chappelle, or something like that.
Yeah. So like the average containment, let's just I'm gonna make up a scenario. So imagine candidate C for conservative, and then there's candidate B for liberal. What does candidate B or candidate L for liberal? He always is the one actually like pushing forth, like he's continuing the vanguard of liberalism. He actually is like a believer in the ideology, which I mean the conservative is as well, but then he needs to actually have a base. He needs to have a voting base, and guess what? The average person ontologically still has right-wing presuppositions. Like there is that core audience that they get their votes from. Like there is like an like I hate to use like this term from the Frankfurt School, but the fascism, like how there's like this innate right-wingness to a lot of people. that would be like, yes, I want I want Christian morality as part of like the state, or like I want to completely ban abortion because I see it as child murder, like, or even just like basic chauvinism for your own country. Like these things do exist, like in that audience that votes for normicon parties, even if the
Ah,
normicon
yes.
candidate isn't.
Normicon parties never saw a base they couldn't sell out
Yes.
to like disgruntled liberals. Okay, your racist grandma will never be have an interview with Jordan Peterson, but Dave Rubin has. So you take that for what you will, my children.
Mm-hmm. And like Dave Rubin and Jordan Peterson, they will be touted up as like the media artificially inflates them to be like the archetypes of what a right winger should be in their eyes. Like, oh, this is the sensible right winger, which is just containment. Like Jordan Peterson telling you essentially wash your penis or clean your room before you engage in politics. Like, no, it's like honestly, like at this point in time, everybody, like, you don't listen to Jordan Peterson's message because everybody has a
Nah,
messy room.
bro, I
Everybody
ain't
has.
washing nothing. Bring your stinky armpits to the protest, my brother. No, but seriously, like, I mean, literally, though, like, for all of the good takes, for all of the, I don't know, a gateway of drugs, all the red pills that started with someone like Peterson or Rubin. I mean, look at it. Okay, so it's like, okay, we can talk about Christianity intellectually, but let's be honest. Peterson doesn't really believe in like God. He definitely doesn't believe that physical Christ physically rose on the third day. None of that. He probably doesn't believe in shit. It's like a symbolic, intellectual, masturbatory exercise for him. That's what Christianity is. That kind of holds society together. That's what he thinks it is. I'm being a little bit uncharitable, but yeah, this is like my raw take, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then and he's like, and he'll intellectualize a bunch of bullshit under Daily Wire and certain ethno-religious, so you can talk about Christianity and conservatives and values, and it just has to be under a certain, I don't want to.
Yeah. Geo, you want to go off that?
Can you hear me?
Or
Yeah, but I like again, I think this reverts back to the liberal origins of our country. I don't think there ever was a conservative side except the social side and the religious side. And once you destroyed those social norms, the only vehicle which was passing down those associations and institutions and leadership positions, they all dissipated over time. And it goes so much deeper than that. It's not just even the political liberal ideology, it's the anti-Europeanness of Americans who came here into 1700s, even before 1776. It's the anti-authority, anti-sovereignty, anti-monarchic, at least those, and to some sense anti-aristocratic, um, in one way, but not so in another way in practicality. It's those sentiments that were already married within, I think, the Reformation, um, as a reaction, and I think that's what we're seeing in the culture of America, where the right wing is saying, "Just leave me alone, leave me alone." You can't make me do these things. You can't make me pass down these traditions. You can't make me be a leader in my community if I don't want to. Um, and this is turning into just the same liberal mentality of not taking on the obligation of these duties. And I think, the last time I can really think of these being major institutions to a degree, or the last spurt of this, is like the 1920s when, Carnegie and Rockefeller invested a shitload of money into our institutions, but most of them were, arts. We didn't have the conservative side doing that with conservative orientated institutions, right? We didn't have,
mm-hmm.
because even Rockefeller, yeah, public schools, that was great. Look at the art schools, that was great. But then Rockefeller also made seminary schools and theological schools, right? but even they are insufficient when they're not going into political positions over time, when none of these institutions push conservatives to go in them to go into the government. The age of the Boston Brahmins are gone and replaced by a managerial elite, whether neoliberal or neoconservative. So
Yeah, the
I
leave
don't
me
need like
alone. The
what
leave.
I'm so like the real question is like, do we even have the ability? Do we even have the prerequisites to even have a vanguard in America to the degree that we're thinking of, that is in some fashion European? Um, and I think the neocons are ironically right. A lot of them were ex-Trotskyites and social democrats who we would consider liberals and leftists who were socially conservative and fiscally conservative. So that was the vanguard of the right, ironically, made out of ex-leftists, ex-Trotskyites, and not ex even. They brought those ideas fundamentally within to the neoconservative party, which was why they themselves are, liberal in the end as well. And just like them, well, where are they anymore? Where are their proteges? There are no more proteges to the neocons. We don't have the 80s, 90s, 2000s their proteges running things. They drift off, they disappear, they go into the private sector. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
But to the leave me aloneism, that is a very good, because it's like it's so endemic of the right. It's like if I hear another like dissident right guy who's like really solid on everything, but just thinks, man, the South will rise again and it's so based because of like, but literally their entire forward policy was just leave me alone. Like literally, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like this sort of um like that. I don't even know. Gio, you're right, because it's like how. Well, how? Well, yes, that's a real question. Landon probably asked himself in like the 1890s, but it's they're real problems, but it's like think of it like as an engineering, like, because we are dedicated to the building project, as it were, of vanguardism. So we need to break containment. We need to embrace, pure the pure chud soul, and just really, because um and kind of just
So I mean, like social, like I kind of say like this, like social engineering does exist, has been used against us, but then like what's stopping like a right wing vanguard from using the same tools? If we somehow were able to get into power or able to at least exert influence, like you can, social conditioning and social engineering like have been proven to be possible because everybody has been psyoped into essentially liberal presuppositions over several, well, I mean, several centuries of liberalism now, of an unbroken chain of liberalism, especially in the United States. Like, America has always been a revolutionary government since day one. It was born in revolution in liberal presuppositions. That's just the case. Um, so that's why every single party in America has always been ontologically liberal. That's just the founding. That's, and like, what do conservatives appeal to? Oh, they're constitutionalists. Well, what is the Constitution? It's a liberal constitution. So you're appealing to liberalism every time, even if
Correct.
you're the,
Correct.
so
Even religiously, you're Protestant, right? Which is against authority in some respect. Um, uh, you know, I think there's just everything of the American project is so leftist. I don't even know how they can turn conservative anymore to what you and I mean, not what like moderates mean, not what liberal conservatives mean, but what actual conservatives mean. And there is no way to revivify that because unfortunately, we'd be ghost dancing it. We'd be trying to ghost dance a conservatism of pre-American conservatism.
Yeah, and so
And then
like
we're such a mixed country at this point, right? No one's fully German, no one's fully Irish. There are, but I'm just saying that there's so many mixed people at this point that there's no way of revivifying that even if we wanted to, which I don't think is possible. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, it's kind of like so like America, yes, is still like Protestant ontologically. Protestantism has kind of dominated at least the idea of what spiritualism is in the United States, which is kind of like this faux pas. Oh, you kind of just believe what you want to believe, man, but I'll believe what I want to believe. That's kind of just been like the curse of liberalism, and it kind of like makes religion relative instead of defined, instead of definite. Like, of course, in later generations, like the Catholics came over, and like, of course, what do we have? We have a very solid grounding, but then even we've been kind of perverted by liberalism and Protestantism just because that's what's been around us. Like several Catholics will pick and choose their theology now. It's kind of a modern trend of Catholics when back in the day you used to have to be like Catholicism was kind of like the vanguard, ironically, in the United States. Like it had to be hardcore. And like the Catholic priests, like Father Coughlin, had to be the ones going out as the firebrands, being like, no, there is a I guess for like 1930s and 40s, like, yes, I am the true chud, and you will follow me because I am like the speaker of truth to this evil liberal system. So, which I mean, that kind of gets back to like Jonathan Bowden. It's like in England, like they're Protestant too. They've been cursed with that heretical strain of thought. But it's the Catholics over there who are kind of the vanguard. And what do you see in the distant right in America? Like what are they disproportionately made out of? They're disproportionately made out of a religious group that has been constantly disenfranchised in this country and is surrounded by enemies, essentially, which are the Catholics. Like I'm a Catholic. I know Charlemagne's a Catholic. I know most people in the distant right that are in America tend to be Catholic 9 times out of 10. So I guess that's kind of a vanguard at this point. Oh, sorry, Preston, I didn't see you leave there.
Yeah, I mean, like the top intellectuals of the right they're either Catholic or they're like Reformed. But okay, like so the populists are either like, well, something. My grandma told me to get church and get married, or maybe they're like low church, but they don't really think about it, or they're raised Catholic, but they don't really think about it. But like, and then they kind of just get swept in like a populist, like, yes, we don't agree with blah blah blah, right? But then the intellectual, head honchos, they're like always of a sort of more rarer, breed. And you even back in like 1800s or something in like antebellum South, there would be like the aristocratic plantation class would usually be like Episcopal, the merchants or like intellectuals would be Presbyterian or something like that, and then like the laboring classes would be Baptist, right? So it's like there's this always been this kind of like in Catholic Europe, it's like the nobles and the peasants would all go to the same mass. Things have changed, but intellect if we're gonna have a ruling minority, it might as well be the papists. But no, but like it should be like it should be like the top hardcore like religious. It shouldn't. If it was reversed, if like that wouldn't be preferable, right?
Mm-hmm. So I mean, does that kind of like answer your question, Gio? Because like there have been these like true like right wingers in the United States. It's like say Father Coughlin is an example. And of course, Father Coughlin being Catholic, being kind of a minority in the United States. I don't know if that's like
There's
what
this
consider that.
one
Right,
Roman
but
Catholic,
mhm,
the
mhm.
Archbishop of, and then I'll. This is just a fun story, and then I'll let Gio. But uh, John Hughes, Archbishop of New York, he was he was like he was like, he encouraged Irish immigrants to, become loyal Americans and whatnot. But he basically was he threatened to burn down New York once. And he also, when asked, like, this is during everyone thought that there was like a Roman Catholic conspiracy to take over America. He's like, yes, we do want to convert all of America. All non-Christian nations and all Protestant nations will be converted. Yes, we are doing it. Like,
Mm-hmm. But back to Geo.
I mean, the problem is even when we see a small group of people trying to facilitate these kinds of movements in the West, it's always a blip. It's never something that extends across time. Whether it's the Tea Party movement, Reaganism was revivified by Newt Gingrich in '94 to an extent, but it never really extended from there because then we had uh George Bush and H.W. Bush was more of like a manager rather than a Reaganite. He was more of like a neoconservative, neoliberal, um, warhawk. And same thing with Trump. I don't know if there's gonna be an extension of this or is it this gonna be just another one-time thing. Um, I just don't
So,
see. Yeah, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna go off like the Trump thing. Like Trump had the energy, but he was kind of like a Sulla. Like, Sulla was like prior to Caesar. Like he was this great like man of the people. He tried to appeal to them to win their heart, essentially try to win hearts and minds, but he truly believed in the Roman system. Like to the end of his days, he truly believed like, yes, like we must appeal to the patricians in the Senate who will totally listen. And guess what? None of his actual reforms actually stuck. It was kind of like a Trump where he brought in reforms and then they were just immediately overturned as soon as he was gone. Like he was the only one with the energy facilitating that energy. And then Caesar was kind of like the fulfillment.
and then, but then that would mean, so what? The conjugator is up next. I don't know about the whole, like as archetypes they work, but I mean, in a way you could consider. In fact, Lincoln is kind of an American Caesar in more ways than one. He's assassinated at just when he's about to basically claim ultimate victory. I mean, so I mean, I don't think we can like use like archetypes alone and like historical timelines as like a point to point way. But I think in some way there is a Caesarian thing coming up, like, but for other reasons, like
Well,
just
it
like
might be
the
something that we can't predict though, because it might be a liberal version of that. The calling
The
forth
blue
of the
Caesar.
liberal, yeah, a blue Caesar that we might have never seen in human history. And even then it might even be even worse than blue. It might go further to lefty Caesar. And you guys might call, even Stalin isn't full lefty Caesar. He's social right, and social right and economically somewhere in between. So we've never seen, let's say, a techno lefty um god or a society yet, and I'm afraid that what's going to come next is something that has never been seen before as a reaction, let's say, to this.
Mm-hmm.
Or it might be the inverse. It might be a moderate red or a dark red. But even then, the reaction to a 200-year system of pure freedom and liberalism, democratization of everything, the next authoritarian end to the cycle is going to be something, I don't know, that we might not even be able to predict.
So,
Which,
so like,
yeah.
America will break, gentlemen. America will break.
so to go on that Caesar point, like, what did Caesar like truly believe, which I personally believe that he wasn't a cynic. I believe that he did believe in everything that he did. He believed that he was like the representative of like the plebeian, like he
Well,
was
and
the
in more ways than one. Like, for example, like when like he discovered a spy that was like a traitor sending like letters to both his enemies and his friends. Instead of like tracking them all down, he burned them and said, "Well, because I took over, because I took power, we're all friends again. We're all Romans. You're all my guys." And that, in fact, that actually is sort of similar to Lincoln, how he wanted to basically like uh, throw the South a bone with like the 10% compromises and stuff like that. But yeah, Caesar, he was not a cynic in the sense of like just trying to get power. He was truly kind of, he did believe in a sort of populist mandate.
and he did believe that he was carrying forth like the legacy of Rome. It's just that he, like being dictator for life, he is the embodiment of Rome. And then after him, like things would return to normality.
I am
Like
the
he's,
state.
I mean, yeah, he was kind of like what did Trump want to do? He effectively he believed in the American system. He just believed, oh, it's been broken by the swamp, and I just need to drain it, and then everything will go back to normal once I'm gone. Instead of realizing like what was like the root problem of what he saw, like what is that swamp, like where does it come from? And he didn't realize that it was like the entire apparatus and this revolutionary nature, this constant like liberal revolution that's just perpetuating into the future was the origin of the swamp that he was trying to fight against. He didn't realize that, kind of like how Caesar didn't realize that it was like all these factions in Rome. He just thought, oh, we can just come together as Romans. Like Trump wanted everybody, all Americans, to come back together, like this kind of like idealized World War II America or something.
Yeah,
So,
it's interesting because Caesar wanted to unify like the different provinces into a unified Roman ethic, right? He
mhm.
wanted to um get rid of all the revolts in the kingdom and make it stable again. Um, and he wanted to centralize the bureaucracy into Rome rather than allowing all the different regions to have their own uh sovereignty. So if the problem, I don't know, the problem here seems to be the opposite of what we're facing, where we want more of the balkanization or regionalism, or the alternative is to replace those at the federal level. Either way, to accomplish this, it would, you know, whether it's a Caesar or not, where are our version of these people? Where can we find like the conservative version of, Bowden, or American Bowden, or Milton Friedman, someone who's
Balkanization
willing
is
to,
cringe.
well, yeah, well, either ways, whichever way I
Yeah.
said. I'm not saying one or the other is preferential. I'm just saying whichever way we decide to go, it still
So
doesn't. Uh, mm,
go
yeah,
finish your statement.
yeah, it still doesn't address the fact that the right is still just right wing liberals in America. What are we going to you know how Caesar tried to unify the provinces into a Roman ethic, right? Harkening back to the Roman kingdoms. Um, what is our Roman kingdom? Is it England? Is it, Germany? Is it Saxon? Is it, you know, this is a problem that we're gonna have to face.
Yeah, and I I don't really have like a direct answer to that. Like what would I like say if I was made Caesar tomorrow? Like would I just try to make everybody like I don't know, like Catholics, and like I'd convert all the population, and then I'd like make everybody LARP as Germans. I couldn't really do that. It's like that's not possible. Like Rome did have a solid identity compared to us. It's like what is our identity? Like we have to appeal to these godlike these like demigods, the founding
The civic
fathers.
religion generally, right?
Yeah.
The American
Yeah.
flag, the Washington Monument, the what's the faces?
The Mount
The
Rushmore.
Mount Rushmore. These become the only thing that unify us, unfortunately. And the Constitution and the constitutional history and the founding fathers. Um, but
And
that
then the
doesn't
World War II
inform.
narrative.
Right, and but then they're all these things are all still
Liberal.
coming from liberal, exactly, the liberal fundamental, like that's the only thing that undergirds all these things. That's from
Well,
how you this is the problem in America, I think, and this is the curse that we're going to have to deal with. That I think we are cursed by the curse of Babel because we've literally put ourselves into that situation ourselves, our founding fathers, and there's no answer to this. And Adams said it, and a lot of our founding fathers said that Madison and Adams both warned against factions. This is what he was talking about, that there is no national unity anymore, except the ones that Hamilton and Madison crafted. And once that is gone, there is literally nothing to revert back to.
well, I like the idea of what you're saying about liberalism undergirds it. Well, in a sense, now sort of liberalism is broken off in this like wokeness, where it's like the original sin of racism followed everything, so we need to burn all that down too. And it's this weird position where it's like the reactionaries are like, no, we need to preserve the altars of liberalism.
Right, to a degree, yeah, to a degree, yeah. Thomas
But
Jefferson.
but if it's sort of it's like, and to be optimistic, right? So the Roman state had this sort of religious aspect to it, but it had a second spiritual awakening in the form of Christendom, right? And then the one true civilization of Rome became the one true Christian universal state of like Byzantium or HRE or whatever, right? And
Okay. I want to address this comment. I mean, this was true. Like there was like distinct cultures in each state. But how much can you say that there's distinct cultures in any state? Like there's a little bit, but it's
I
mostly homogenized now.
never meant to be any national unity. I guess Washington's farewell address was just like trolling then. Like yes, there was meant to be like a like some distinctiveness, but like if Britain can have national unity with all its ethnic whatever the fuck, and it can't even at this point, right? Then yes, America was meant to have some sort of national unity, at
Well,
least
that's the thing
intentionally.
that so Hamilton was basically trying to extend Washingtonian Hamilton bureaucracy, just like FDR and Lincoln tried to extend their bureaucracy to prevent all this factionation from being like the only thing that keeps the country together. And yeah, the problem is that unless there was that kind of elites there to keep that going, it was always going to be deconstructed by liberals who would argue their way into those bureaucracies and replace the
Mm-hmm.
dominating bureaucracy. So Hamilton and Madison's answer to this problem that I'm trying to convey is that they thought that they could make a civic national religion, and they're right that you can, because a government is a religion, as Joseph de Maistre says. It has its ministers, it has its priests, right? It has its sacred places. It has its the bureaucrats are essentially the priests and the politicians, right? So they're partially right, but the part that they didn't understand was that, as the Maestri puts it, um, it's also mixed with the religious reason and the national reason and the culture and history reason, and all three of these things have to be married and intermingled until it becomes something that cannot be easily pulled apart. Whereas when you separate those three things, then each of them become easy to pull apart. The traditions can be taken away by new laws, where it's harder for you to practice your thing, or by social convention, where everybody decides we're not going to pray no longer to not offend other people. That alone was sufficient enough to destroy the national reason of religion and the national reason of community doing it from the bottom up. I think the problem is that the gamble was by Madison and Hamilton that the civic nationalism alone would be enough. And what we've
Mhm.
seen is them getting co-opted by other elites who are
Yo,
just
yo,
as
Gio, are you
passionate.
reading these comments from Cody Bassett? He said Jefferson was the best founder.
I mean, there's a few things that he was right on, like states' rights. He was right on, but I don't know. For me, I think Madison, Hamilton, and Adams, John Jay, um, maybe Gouverneur Morris. These types of figures were more probably on what we would consider our side. In the loosest terms. Um, I mean, Madison and Adams were the ones who said, look, this Constitution was written solely for a moral and righteous people and none other. They were all able to understand the uniqueness of the situation that a lot of these other founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson was an American exceptionalist. He thought that we could spread these ideas to the rest of the world, to every corner of the world, and apply American liberal democracy of a Eurocentric position to every single people around the world. And so, if you want the American empire building of pushing LGBT and transgender ideology, then I guess, thank Thomas Jefferson, you know?
In summation, Cody, Lincoln was based, national unity is based, and Jefferson is cringe.
Yeah, I don't really have much comment on the Lincoln and I mean Jefferson. I personally like to me he's like the arch liberal of the American Revolution. I mean he effectively was like the firebrand. Like if liberalism had a firebrand preacher, that was Thomas Jefferson. Um, and generally like his ideas like I kind of say like he had the ultimate luxury positions like of most men at his time. Like he was a like quite wealthy individual for the colonies times, lived quite comfortably. He was kind of detached from like the actual war and the conflict. Uh, but he's made quotes like say, "Oh, the tree of liberty must be like fed with like the blood of tyrants and yada yada," calling for like essentially perpetual revolution. Like he was like kind of the first Trotskyite, I guess. Like he was always calling for revolution. When France's revolution broke out, he literally assisted the National Convention, like write their constitution and instigate a reign of terror. Like he assisted in the organization of like the Committee of Public Safety in France that would end up beheading like what was it like at least 30,000. I think it was like it's like ranges wildly.
Yes, the committees of safety, which were also formed in the revolutionary American state governments, where, I mean, you gotta love it with like liberal Enlightenment revolutionaries that, like, Orwell hit the nail on the head. You have the Ministry of Truth, Ministry of Safety, Committee of Public Health.
So yeah, like in any like Gio was saying, like in secular regimes, like the state does become God. It dictates when a person can be arbitrarily executed. It dictates the morality of the people. It dictates like all these things and it acts like God. I mean, like what was like in France, like the cult of reason, like or something that like the French revolutionaries like propped it up as like
Yeah,
a
yeah.
alternative to Catholicism. Um, and like try to get people to like worship it. It's like no, and it was like the Roman goddess of reason or something they were trying to like worship. Um,
Correct.
but yeah, it was like this is like why like I'm like honestly like it is like a poison, this idea of like separation of church and state that only comes out of liberalism. Like liberalism hates the idea of the church because then it makes it accountable. It makes it accountable morally. And when it refers to the church, it means like Rome or like Byzantium, like an actual established church, not like these oh, Pastor Jim Bob is going to tell the government their morality. It's like no, it was like the Pope telling the king the morality, essentially.
I remember, but even Pastor Jim Bob would be better than like this secular BS, right? Like Lincoln, for example, his personal pastor advised him in the a constitutional amendment that would confess Jesus Christ as Lord of the United States, or something of that nature, like making it a Christian government. Like, you know, that wouldn't exactly have pissed me off, right? But this sort of, but you know, now we don't even have Pastor Jim Bob. It's well, if we might have, I don't know, who is Joe Biden's chaplain? Like I don't know.
You mean his personal rabbi?
Hey, I just
Exactly.
wanted to
See,
reply to Cody in the comments about Jefferson a little bit, because I just want to bring it to first person sources, right? Primary sources. Can you just bring up the GO2 real quick? I just want to play him 2 clips real quick to show him what Jefferson actually thought.
Damn. This went from podcast to audio to AI reading. Let's go. Let's do it.
I mean, primary sources, you know, work best, you know. So this is Jefferson and Adams on equality and what their thoughts were at the time. Here we go.
In that island. Adams thought that the French Revolution was breeding false notions of equality, and that these were being picked up by the Democrats of this day and undermining the stability of American society. These developments inspired Adams to write a series of letters to his son Charles on just what the modern doctrine of equality really meant. Declarations of equality in the state constitutions and the Declaration of Independence meant not a physical but a moral equality. Of course, common sense, said Adams, told us that we were not equal in fact, not all equally tall, strong, wise, handsome, active, but we were equal in the sight of God, equal in rights and obligations, nothing more. But this emphasis on moral equality in so many documents should not blind us to the actual inequalities among individuals, inequalities that were present from birth. These physical inequalities among men in a state of nature were infinite. They were so obvious, so determinate, and so unalterable that no man is absurd enough to deny them. They lay the foundation for inequalities of wealth, power, influence, and importance throughout human life. Laws and government have neither the power nor the right to change them. Even the simplest democracy would have inequalities. A few will start forth more eloquent, more wise, and more brave than the rest, and acquire a superior influence, reputation, and power. Inequality was inevitable in any developed society. Once the arts and sciences, manufactures, and commerce were admitted into the society, inequalities of property would naturally arise and were impossible to eradicate. Plato had tried to equalize property in his Commonwealth and failed. Why were Jefferson's followers so eager to deny the reality of inequality? If they were so anxious lest aristocracy should take root, Adams suggested to his son, why didn't they eradicate all the seeds of it, including the use of titles? He had been burned so badly over his preoccupation with titles in 1789 that he couldn't pass up an opportunity to mock his opponent's desire to do away with them. If the Republicans hated titles so much, why not address the Speaker of the House as Frederick Muhlenberg? Why not call the Republican congressman from Virginia Billy Giles, William Branch Giles? Insurgents, said Adams, always sought to simplify society and level people. During Shays' Rebellion in 1786 and the Whiskey Rebellion in 1794, for example, Gaffer and Gammer, Mr. and Mrs. were laid aside. Once the insurgents have destroyed everything, we may hope that we shall be out of danger of titles and aristocracy. He told his...
So, what people don't recognize about Thomas Jefferson was that he was that lefty progressive communist revolutionary. That's all he knew. That's what he lived and breathed. He would be the type to be open. He would have been open to a lot of these ideologies. He wouldn't have a anchor to argue against these ideologies with. And you once you really read what they actually wrote in private letters to each other, you start to get a vision of Thomas Jefferson. And this is yeah, this
I
was
I
literally
recall a quote. I recall a quote where he said, "Men of quality are not scared by women of equality." And I just thought to myself, "Oh my God! Not only was he a proto-communist faggot, he was a male feminist straight up."
yes.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. Take that, Jeffersonians. Jefferson was a male feminist bitch.
Yeah, and I mean that's why I called him like a Trotskyite earlier. Is like he believed in this idea of perpetual revolution. Kind of like I guess like the founding father of perpetual revolutionism. Um, yeah, I like this term, the paleo woke, by John Pineda.
I'm stealing that. We're stealing that. That's
Yeah.
if anyone asks, that's a Dark Counselor exclusive take.
The paleo woke
Uh,
Thomas
I mean,
Jefferson.
to Cody's point, Cody Bassett's point, yeah, that's true too. But then he also said when William Short sent him a letter from Paris to Versailles saying that even their own allies were getting their heads cut off by Robespierre, his actual answer back to him was some heads, even our own, must roll. In the name of the greater revolution. So maybe you didn't read that letter and just the one that you read. So you should read that letter too.
Yeah. And I mean like this idea like the revolution too, like the idealization of revolution period. That was something like kind of proto communist um of Thomas Jefferson. Like the revolution itself brings on its own character. It is like a being in itself, and it is perpetually good. And everything who stands against the revolution is perpetually evil. Um, I mean, yeah, that's like something that comes out of like Lincoln's. I mean, yeah, like Jefferson did inspire, I guess, like the communist ideal of like the perpetual revolution, the idea of the revolution being eternally good. All progress is part of the revolution, yada yada. So yeah, Cody, I'm sorry, but we're gonna have to denounce your love of Jefferson. Crit- okay, yeah, Cretaceous woke also. Uh, are you guys there, or am I just
Yes,
No, I'm
sir.
here. Yeah, I'm here.
Soldiers
So
under
well, what are you
command.
doing against our current elite? I don't know. What are Americans in general doing against the current elite? Why are they not uh taking up the cross as let's say lefty progressive social democrats and socialists have done for the last 100 years and sacrifice their material gains to be able to go into these institutions because maybe that's what it takes. Maybe it takes a cadre of conservative elites who are willing to make that sacrifice and to train their next generation of kids to be the same way, just like John Adams trained John Quincy Adams to be in that regard. um instead of letting them be artists and basket weavers and women's studies experts and literature experts, I would say.
yeah. Well, I don't get where this point popped into my head, but like Lenin, what did he still need? Like he didn't only come in with the vanguard. He also like he had a portion of the Russian army like defect to him. The some of the regiments in Petrograd itself like formed council soviets. Um, so he kind of needed like this appeal to at least an institution, like the officers in those regiments. Um, I'm trying to remember the exact names of those regiments in Petrograd that flipped to his side, but so like what are we doing against our current elites? I mean, this is like a tough battleground because almost everybody who has wealth, which pretty much guides the United States, like it's not military men there's no military strongman who's able to dictate policy in the United States like they could like in Russia. It's essentially the wealthy and the bureaucrats and the technocrats, and all of them are kind of like within the same ideology. It's kind of like I hate to use like Yarvin's term, but the cathedral, like they truly do believe like in the same morality, even if they have like slight variations. Well, then the right are perpetually locked out of these institutions, or they have to keep their head down to be within these institutions. And if they say anything, if they reveal their power level, they're gone, or they're at least isolated from any advancement within these institutions.
But to Jeffersonianism, like among the dissident right, like there's like this sort of, just like I was talking earlier, like about the Confederacy, like oh yeah, Confederacy, Jefferson based. It's like sort of this like well, because they buy the whole small, like guys, small government doesn't exist. Like however you define it, it doesn't. It's like the more specific you make the definition, the less valuable it is. So if it means like less taxes, less bureaucracy, you know what was the smallest government on the damn world? The Mongol horde. Okay, you pay tribute, a small tribute of 10%, or you die. It's that simple. And you're cool after that. But what does that mean, right? But like Jefferson, I mean, I would even argue that, what is Geo conceded like states' rights to him. I don't even think like you can like color within the lines, I guess. But like,
Yeah,
the
but he
Lincoln.
made like the problem with Jefferson is, if you're a person who's like on the dissident right, you might like him because of the Southern communist you know uh the kind of system put into place, right? So you would be more in line with that thought. But that only worked for this. That only works because it was the Southerners. They were okay with the landowning gentry. 90% of the people were illiterate. They were Scots, Irish, Irish Scots. Um, of a certain type who were used to having an overlord, who had to come from a feudal system, whereas the Northerners were all merchant class Protestant. So for them, they would have never accepted that. Um, so like even if you are on Jefferson's side, eventually the Puritans would have come and taken over. That's why we had the carpetbaggers. That's why we had the Puritan school teachers coming and brainwashing Southerners to become more Puritan. That's why we
Yeah,
had the Boston Brahmin elite. But if you don't have a Southern elite to counter the Boston Brahmin elite, eventually the leftists come in with their managerial elite with both some progressivism and FDR's bureaucracy. And then what do you have? You have nothing. You have nothing because you were so localized in your state that you ignored the national problem, whether we like it or not, that would have eventually arisen. And Joseph Ellis, I'm reading a book by him called Quartet. It's four of the conservative founding fathers that he writes about who started a second American Revolution, which was the Hamiltonian Washington bureaucracy. And he actually argues that uh that what was shit, I just had the point. Shit, I
what's so Potato Revin is saying, well, but that's all that about Irish. That's before the English took over and crap. Like so we're talking about Scots Irish in America creating the culture of the American South. They were basically like unindustrious yeoman
yeah,
farmers with a fighting
right,
spirit. They
right,
weren't
yeah,
like merchant or anything
correct.
like that. Like Irish, like in America, they're either like it's very like rare to find them like in like an executive position. They're like police department, like they're like people who like if your kid moves into the private sector, like they'll joke to themselves, oh yeah, I'm the last Irishman in the family. You're just American. Like, but yeah,
Mhm.
like the sort of federalism of Jeffersonianism, it has some of its virtues, but the problem is that it only people thinks it's the rights and your liberties isn't what create order. The mutual responsibilities and the political associations of institutions, of states, federal government, and all these things, that is what guaranteed the stability, not this like farmer horse ranchers. I guess I'd ask where, but Revan, but yeah, but like generally though, where were we?
So, essentially, like because essentially like this ethnic group never cared to actually
Orange
wish
or
to exert
green,
political
Revan?
power.
Orange or green? It's my only question.
But yeah, so like these like the national, like they didn't focus on the national, and because of that, like their morality was not at the national level. Like that's like a big thing with like the
Speaking
right.
of Scots Irish, though, the best president probably in all of American history is Andrew Jackson, who is sort of a states' rights Democrat, and then in the same breath, when there was like the nullification crisis in South Carolina, he said, if they try anything, I will send troops in there and I will hang the first traitor from the first tree with the first rope. So he was sort of like this, on the one hand, this very top-down power user, but he was also, okay, no, not Jeffersonian I mean, I literally just quoted you a thing where he basically said he'd hang people for the nullification crisis. Yeah, so
And this
you
this whole
know,
idea of like states' rights. I'm going.
Jackson was based, but the second best president is Lincoln, and the third best president is Andrew Johnson. That's my list. Okay. Actually, no,
So
wait. Probably put John Adams somewhere in there too, because John Adams was cool.
I'd probably put him as number 3. But to like address all this like states' rights, like so this is kind of like the problem with like libertarians. Like they believe that like these immaterial positions existed a priori before a state. Like no, like these positions are post hoc. They're after you've come up with the idea for, well, it's not even like the idea of a regime. It's like after you have the regime. And then it's like negotiations within that regime. It's like, are you going to have more? Are you going to reduce the federal government in size that technically gives states more rights just because the federal doesn't have that much power?
It's very simple. Lincoln was a conqueror. He conquered the rebellious. He crushed the rebellion. He didn't give a shit about consent of the governed or any of that bullshit. He said it. A house divided against itself cannot stand. Eventually, America will either be all slave or all free. And, oh, look, he turned out to be right. Isn't that crazy? Lincoln was based. The dissident right needs to stop LARPing and acting like the Jeffersonian and the states' rights crowd. Just because the federal bureaucracy is now your enemy doesn't mean that, like, for example, like Bismarck, who unified Germany. Just because modern Germany sucks dick doesn't mean Bismarck was bad. He's our guy. Bismarck is our guy. John Adams is our guy. Andrew Jackson is like a little bit Jeffersonian in his like disposition, but he also threatened to hang anyone who violated his tariff policy. So you tell me about that state's right. But and then so we I mean, even the Lincoln cabinet would, if their quotes were put on a poster, oh my God. Yes, Lincoln was such a merchant, even though he was a lawyer his entire life. See, this is the meme where it's like every political opponent needs to be like put in a particular cast. Like, even like if you want to talk about merchants, like the Southern aristocratic planter class, they were merchants. They were selling cotton abroad to foreign powers, and they were willing to tear the Union asunder to secure that economic reality that they thought was more important than the national reality. America, well, I don't know. It worked pretty good for a while. Okay.
So,
Also, the South was literally the most based part of America. Like, yes and no. Like,
I'm just going to chime in here. It's like, like the idea of like states' rights won't solve shit. That's just what I'm telling people who like try to shit for states' rights today. It's like, okay, give more power to your states. Okay, so yeah, every state has like these cuck parties also running it. Like,
yeah,
guess what?
or just yeah. So, if I'll allow me to chime in, right? So it's like you have. So it's like. So, like Lincoln said, House of. So it's like after the abortion case, right? The Dobbs, every conservative is like, oh my God, states' rights. Well, now we can choose to not. I was like, wait. So you're saying there's a states' right to allow abortion? And like, why is the conservatives willing to give this to the left? This is cucked. We should say no abortion anywhere. That's what we should have done. But so, and that is a virtue that's completely lost on Jeffersonian. Well, if I can have my little yeoman republic, then I don't care about the national unity or anything like that. No. Be like Lincoln, be like Sherman, conquer the rest of the country, and make it bend the knee. Stop being bitches, man. Okay, Jeffersonianism is not based. States' rights isn't based. In fact, if we're being honest, perfectly honest, like low taxes and a non-interventionist government is probably not that based. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, like I'm just kind of been like saying this for like a long time. Like honestly, it doesn't even like matter. Like at the end of the day, like oh, do the states have more rights than the federal government? It's like that doesn't fucking matter. Like what matters is like your morality, your group dominating. It's like okay, so like if your group, like say, let's say this is a complete confederacy, and like the federal government has like only power to like issue currency and like the military and like foreign affairs. Like imagine if it was like that situation. Well, then your objective is to make every state conform to your morality, to your group's interest.
But yeah, another thing about vanguardism in history is that every time they take over, like for example, the French Revolution and the Russian Revolution, they create a new legal code, right? So Napoleon has his Napoleonic Code. The post-Lenin Soviet Union created their own legal system. Like, I feel like because I brought up abortion, right? Like, abortion shouldn't be optional. It should be illegal in every state, and it shouldn't be in any way alterable by anyone. And, like, wouldn't it be cool if we had, like, a United States legal code that was, like, a completely unitary corporate Fed partnerships in bed with Marx?
Like a
Yeah, so
like
this is
a new Napoleonic code of America.
So Marx liked America for tons of reasons, mostly because basically it was like this liberal imperium, which Geo points out. But even like things occur to me, Marx wasn't even really consistent in his like of America. Like he liked the American War because it was like Germanic white people taking over the stupid Mexicans, and the white people could develop the forces of production. but he also supported abolition, even though that theoretically wouldn't that just like, so he was racist, but he also wanted to free the slaves. It's like weird. So Marx, like seriously, this whole meme of like the tyrant Lincoln, it's a cartoonish, ridiculous agrarians. There's something to be said about that. Yeah, he wrote a letter. You know who else wrote letters to Lincoln? Everyone, Cody. Stop coping. I'm serious. Until you renounce Thomas Jefferson, you're not part of the team, okay? Like, when you die and you go to the pearly gates, St. Peter's going to be like, but you I don't know, but you're too Jeffersonian, though. That's
Jefferson was a proponent of global, like some kind of a global communistic trade order. He wanted every nation to trade with each other as much as possible, and he wanted every um person who came to visit your country, as long as they were part of this uh union, I guess, that they would be citizens in your country as well when they visited. So imagine if Europeans came to visit the United States and they could vote in our elections. That's literally what he advocated against
Yeah.
Adams's chagrin. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean that's why like I call Lincoln, I mean not Lincoln, Jefferson, the arch liberal. Like he was like the arch liberal that perpetuated this idea. I mean, he would have been a proponent of global homo if he would be around today. He'd be like the
man.
Justin Trudeau.
We started from vanguardism and containment to now it's like American political theory and history. It's been a
Yeah.
wild ride. But
I
yeah,
mean,
I
but then
am a mouth breather, and I'm proud of that. And you should all be ashamed of yourselves because you don't have the ability to breathe through the mouth like I do. But but like, come on. But yes, you know what? I mean, I was saying Lenin is based. You know what, guys? Karl Marx is based too. Okay, I'm
I
sorry.
mean, I mean, like so I've actually
No,
been
but
thinking
the
about.
problem with Marx is he's insufficient. But go ahead, Marx.
Oh, I was just thinking, like, I've just kind of thought about this. Like, Marx had like this utopian vision of like, say, oh, a man who does like what, like agriculture in the morning or like some sort of like labor in the morning. Then he goes and like in the afternoon he like writes poetry or like philosophizes and stuff. It's like I honestly think that's like that describes kind of like him, what he wishes that he could be himself, but also like there is a particular class of men who can be like that, but they're an elite that can be like the philosopher, but also like a worker at the same time, and they have all these skills. Um, but the average worker could not. Like the average yeoman is he could probably like do labor all day and like have a fulfilling life from that, but he could never be a philosopher. Like there's too few.
Children of the Ashes. Very good comment. Southerner, I renounce national political project and embrace my sectional heritage and Georgia era thinkers. But applying them to such a large and desperate nation is difficult. Well, it's a good point, but I think in some sense, like, secession's been taken off the thing. Like, so any balkanization that would happen, it wouldn't be like a victory. It would be like because the country literally loses the ability to be run by some government in Washington. Like it would have to be like infrastructure is so fucked that literally the federal government cannot govern, say like the West Coast or some shit. That's how it would have to be, right? So, if America's doomed, and maybe it is, maybe if Sodom and Gomorrah burned, then America is in for some shit. But don't be like in Children of the Ashes. I mean, that's a good title that kind of gets the spirit of this entire point, which is, yeah, I guess it would basically You're just kind of embrace sectional, embrace lived reality before you any ideal political project. Fight for your people, your folk, but just don't buy into like, you know,
I mean,
My
that
problem
kind of
is
gets back
children.
to the
If I can just talk about this real quick, because so if you look at South Korea and look at their history, they're in a unique position because they're a small peninsular um country where they have a very good strategic port that can be used by major powers as a jumping spot to invade another one of the major powers. Also, if you can hold that port, you can control trade in Northeast Asia amongst the tigers. And traditionally, you had the Mongolians to the north. Usually, they were Balkanized, right? So even before and after Genghis Khan, you would have raids from different tribes living near the border. Then you had so we needed a constant army in the north over there. Then you have the Chinese as a constant big brother to South Korea, whether wanted or not, where they impose their rule on on Chosun, for example. Then you have the Japanese come in and try to invade from the 1600s. Then you have it later on in the 1900s. Um, the problem here is not whether Korea or not will have someone above them. It's just who they will have to choose to be above them. Um, that's the problem we have with balkanization in America, because even if we are to balkanize, and that was what it was before Lincoln, you had the problem of Puritan carpetbaggers coming down to teach Southern children the Puritan mindset, the Puritan behavior, religion, and their way of teaching, I guess, history, etc., etc. So if you won't teach your kids, someone else will do it for you, unfortunately. And I think that's the
Mhm.
problem with the South, that they have this such a wild Braveheart mentality that they think that they can have no ruler, but eventually a Cromwell will appear. Eventually the Romans will come. Eventually
this
someone will come, and when they come, will you be unified under a single flag, or will you be scattered Scottish tribes who can't unite? And what you're arguing right now is that you want to be the scattered Scottish tribes who are always under and on the back foot because they're always reactionary and waiting for some big enemy to appear so that they can unite, rather than uniting so that if an enemy appears, you are united to be able to resist them. I think that's the problem we're having here. Whether we like it or not,
no
someone, well, hold up. Whether we like it or not, especially in America, this seems to be the case, that if you aren't willing to send your elites into the government, someone else will send their elites into the government, or their midwit elite, whatever you want to call it, the activist class. They will start creating acolytes to go into government. We saw this with the neocons. We saw this with the progressives. We saw this with the Social Democrats in the 1920s and 30s. They were willing to do that. And the ones who are so libertarian that or anti-government that they're not willing to do that, I'm sorry, but they will have to suffer the consequences of what would you like a dominating force, an outside force that is coming in to take over.
But no, yeah,
Yeah.
this is such a deep well, like American political theory and history and how it all. This could almost be worth like another stream so that we can completely debunk Cody Bassett and his heathenry. Let's do the Lincoln is base stream sometime, Darth.
Uh, yeah, I guess you'll be the main proponent of that one because I'm kind of like neutral on Lincoln. I don't really have a solid opinion on him. But just to address some of the comments that have been coming in, Jim Grimes, like, so I don't really like these hypotheticals because like, what is the United States at this point? So it's the empire of literally the gay. Like, oh, what is the State Department's objective in like Middle Eastern countries? Oh, we're going to wave the pride flag in like Muslim nations and impose gay morality upon the world. Would I want that on other nations? Would I want like Mexico? I mean, like Canada's already like a vassal state. Mexico's kind of a vassal state. But you'd want to bring it under that heathenistic control. Like I no, like I wouldn't unless America was
Well,
like the based empire. Like
well,
unless you're
that's the
like
thing.
the
It's so if America is based America, if it's the United States of America, right? Then by definition, let's literally just Children of the Ashes. That's like the potential out from our present. But that's my whole critique is that the Confederacy, they were the leave me alone. Jeff Davis literally said, "We wish only to be left alone." Sorry, Jeff Davis, but you're a pussy. Okay? Lincoln said, we've been talking. This is like prudentialist. Everyone's on this, right? The side who wants to win and the side who wants to conquer will always win over the side who wants to be left alone. Now, if you want to have like the United States, the no, the Confederacy of Chud republics or some shit, and then it's slowly crushed by the federal government who wants to force your kids to be trans, but you just want to be left alone. Well, you can do that, but I actually want to claim all of America. I want to force California kids to be taught about Jesus, not the other way around. So the example of that is Lincoln and the Civil War. But
so yeah, I want to address also this comment. Like liberalism is expansionistic, at least ideologically. Like it can't. Like what did FDR famously say? Oh, we're going to, and Woodrow Wilson. Oh, we're going to make the world safe for democracy. Like it is inherently like intolerant of any other regime that isn't liberal. Um, and it will go to any lengths to make sure that there is no illiberal nation. Or if there is an illiberal nation, they will be completely cut off and isolated as best as possible. Like look at North Korea, look at Iran, look at like these explicitly illiberal regimes that explicitly stand against the American empire. Like they are purposely isolated. So like no, like if America's expansionistic right now, except for it does it through economics and like fake pacts and fake treaties that just make countries vassal states. So like I mean like we were saying, like if it was like the based American empire, like if it was right wing chuds in charge, not global homo, I mean sure, like expand away, but like I said, I wouldn't want to subject other peoples to the gay. Like, and that's honestly what liberalism already does.
yeah, this really is almost worth another stream. I really like this, especially the deep theory cell dive with Geo over here. So, who offered to? Man, Cody
guy.
Bassett offered to be on the so I challenge you, Cody. I will prove that Lincoln was in fact our guy. 100% our guy.
Yeah, I guess Cody, if you really want to like subscribe, maybe like leave a comment, like not in the live chat, but like in the actual comment section, and I'll get you a link to my server. I guess if you really want to come on. It's a very private server, but for the U.S. I don't support world influences. Like, yes, I mean, like that's essentially what I'm saying, Jim Grime, and I'm glad we're in agreement. Like, I don't like. I purposely wish to undermine global homo at every little thing that I could do to undermine it. and
Me and my
prevent it.
friends should rule the world, and our enemies should be in want to have anything.
Right, but
Yeah,
Jim
that's
Grime, the
honestly,
problem is that that position, as Charlemagne puts it, is the original right wing position, be pre-Enlightenment. The problem is that we are post-Enlightenment in a country that was built on the Enlightenment that pushes Enlightenment values, and those ideas are innately evangelical because that only works in a system where every country is like this. Um, so it's innately global influence. So the only way to take this down is to figure out some kind of unified religious national ethos that can beat out the liberal perspective. My question is, what can that be in a country that is originally based on Protestantism, which is rebellion against the church authority, liberalism, which is rebellion against sovereignty of the king and the aristocratic republics. And then also democracy is a rebellion for in political theory. So how do you justify sovereignty and authority in a country that is built against sovereignty and authority? Um, it would have to be a right wing Caesar of some kind, and there's no guarantee of that either, though, in this country as a reaction. Um,
yeah. I
yeah,
mean, like I
that
said earlier, it would take social engineering, but right wing social engineering. Like, you'd have
yeah,
to
over like a
recondition the
hundred
people.
years. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it would take
No,
like
and
three.
I think the people there's also an element that the people are able to accept things, right? Because if you look at Americans, maybe that's the thing. Maybe that's the thing that I have to consider, that Americans in general are so malleable over if as long as you give them little bit at a time, that you can inculcate them into anything. Maybe that's also something we should take into consideration, and maybe I have to see that as one of the externalities that I'm not taking into consideration. Because if you look at America, um, gay marriage, nary a whisper from the right. Uh, what are all the major social, interracial marriage, civil rights, nary a whisper, nary a whisper. And I think we can use that to our advantage, just as the
What
liberals
did
have used it to their
what did
advantage to
Yuri
an extent.
Bezmenov say? 30 years,
Yeah,
30 years
yeah.
of education, and you can make the public believe anything.
Hmm.
Give
Yeah,
me 30 years. Give me 30 years of a Chud Caesar, and we can make this bitch perfect.
that, and also like I think it's also like 30 years, like to make them believe anything, but like 3 generations to completely cement it, like to completely solidify the social engineering. Like it takes generally 3 generations, because then you won't have like grandpappy like saying, "Oh, I remember the liberal order prior." Like there will be no more grandpas anymore. There will be only like your right wing chud state, essentially. Um, that's I mean that's essentially what you have to do. Like 3 generations um, of social conditioning. And I mean, you kind of don't let up either after that. You just kind of, but by then it's already solidified and it's kind of ingrained in everybody. And then like people police themselves. Like what did Jonathan Bowden say? Like he said that he was with a friend and his friend looked over his shoulder before like saying something politically incorrect and it was like in the middle of a woods. So like in his mind he was like self-policing. And that's like what happens after like generations of social engineering like that, you know.
And that's the
Um
national reason that I speak of, or the national behavior, right? It's that what things are allowed and what things aren't. The left have and the liberals have just co-opted this for global home, LGBT and trans. We could do this for our religious beliefs, etc., traditionalism. But if we
mhm.
are to do this, we literally have to create a new elite class to replace the managerial elite who mimic aristocratic tendencies, such as training their kids as polymaths to take up these positions within the next generation. If we aren't able to
Mhm.
cultivate that, then all of this is doomed because we're just doomed to repeat the same Jeffersonian revolution or the federal government that is stagnant and it can't do anything. Those are
National
our only
Yeah.
ethos.
alternatives. Exactly. Those are our
Whoa,
only two
hold.
alternatives.
Children of the Ashes, I must protest. Lincoln was based. Beginning, middle, and end.
Um,
I will prove
so
this in a debate.
so yeah, like the whole idea, like okay, so like yeah, we need to find like our own elite. And we need to create a parallel elite. Like what do most elite theorists say? Like most of history is just like competing elites. Like it's just competing elite groups against each other. The average like plebeian honestly doesn't matter in like the long term. Like what are we ruled by now? We're ruled by a money elite, ruled by both financial and managerial elite that generally cooperate between each other. But like what's the alternate, like we would have to create like our own alternative elite. The right wing chud elite, whatever that is. I mean like I don't know, like I'm I guess in the military side. I'm military, but I'm also an artist. Um, I guess like that's the elite traits. Like, you know, the martial and the artistic are both elite traits, but then also we need like say businessmen who want like the right wing chud state. Um, to be our like to be that group of elites, we need like media personalities and stuff. Like that's just kind of like the you need to find like these elites. You need to, and then you also need to cultivate elites. Like say, which is kind of hard today, especially with the mass homogenization of culture, especially like with social media, with basic media, um, with with public schooling and all that. It kind of homogenizes everybody or tries to homogenize them all. So you kind of have to like what you'd have to like literally send your kids to the monasteries, like you
Yeah, all
build
the
like a
institutions, like so if you look at the European monarchies, they would have like the main branch and then they would have cadet branches, right? So even within one family, you would have the main bloodline and then the side bloodlines, which would make up the cadet branches. And those guys would go into business, they would go into some of the lower institutions, right? They might be a trader, they might be a merchant, but then the main bloodlines are the ones that were supposed to produce kids to go into uh, the scholastics, the priesthood, like you said, the military, and continue that tradition of whichever ones that the family decided that they were going to go into,
Mhm.
depending on the children, etc., etc. So it doesn't matter. Like if you produce five kids, great. Send the if three of them just like John Adams's children, not all of them went into government. One of them died. It was John Quincy Adams. So you have to even sift through and find the ones that are you're able to at least
Cultivate.
yes, cultivate and curate exactly. Um, I don't know if you've watched Yellowstone. That's the problem that Kevin Costner's character has. He has three kids who are all dysfunctional because he wasn't there for his kids when the mom died. Let's say that's the premise of the show. And because they're weak ass bitches. No,
Because
but
they're Hispanic freaks.
because that's the liberal storyline, right? All throughout the 90s. If your dad had just been there on Christmas, everything would in your life would have been better. No, maybe if you had been given structure and discipline and had some of that as a
Egalitarian
child,
political
maybe that would have
dialogue.
created that instead. But basically the liberal answer to this problem of the kid feeling despondent is no, the dad must have been there on Christmas, as if like the dad being there on Christmas would literally change the children from being undisciplined, uncurated, uncultivated children. That's the fallacy right there, and that's the fallacy that we on the right make again and again and again because we're still liberal to a degree. We're still, uh, we still either have that leftist, leave me alone, don't tread on me, which is just the leftist version, the revolutionary spirit on the right. And unfortunately, they will unite with the left if there is a Caesar in America, if there is a monarchy in America, from what I can see. Yeah.
I mean, like, what is like? This goes back to like right wing parties being containment. It's like, what do the right in every single Western liberal nation do? The the right wing party punches right. Like, say, why does Germany not have like uh, a CDU, FDP? I believe that's their other like right wing party, and then um, AFD. Like they could have formed a coalition, but the CDU, they're like, no, we're going to punch right. We're going to say we're never going to form a coalition with AFD. So literally, they don't have a right wing government in Germany because they're not willing to reach over to the people that are slightly more right than they are. And that's because the right wing parties in the West are containment. And they're meant to curtail the right wing energies and prevent them from actually, like the true right wing, from gaining power in any nation. Also, to go to Jim Grimes is like, yes, but I mean, like, you don't even have to emphasize like religious monarchy, because like monarchy in itself is innately religious. Like, say in Western Christian monarchy, who crowns the king? It's the bishop. Like, that's a symbolic God crowning the king to reign
I
and
mean,
rule.
ideally, yes, but like if you think balkanization is going to be hard, balkanization under a crown and altar king with this church-state relation that would be familiar to us. I mean, you know what? If like someone declares themselves Prince of the Peninsula and like like a king of Florida is declared or some shit tomorrow, and they're basically 100% based, then I'm going to tacitly support them no matter what I think about the practicality of it. But that's never going to happen. So, people forget Byzantium, the emperor was not a king. He was not a monarch. Well, in our modern sense, he's a monarch because he's a pseudo-hereditary ruler for life. But emperor in like the original Roman context sort of translates to like president and generalissimo for life, right? So it's sort of a pseudo-republican, pseudo-monarchical mishmash. So you can have even, and this is what John Adams and the Federalists wanted, was a monarchical republic, which is something that very much can be due with the sort of leftovers of the American political project.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
real quick, I remember the thing I was gonna mention about the book that I'm reading, Ellis. So Ellis has a book called The Quartet, The Second American Revolution, and he basically says that um the real debate going on between the Jeffersonians and the rightists is actually whether we're gonna be a nationalist country or a globalist country. That's actually the real debate that they're having, essentially. Um, and I think the problem is whoever whoever wanted Jim or Cody, I think, whoever said that they wanted to balkanize, is that if we understand that the elites are the real problem, that a smoky elite who has no real who has anonymity and is able to move behind the shadows using money as a weapon, you won't solve that problem in a balkanized situation, in a city state or balkanized situation. And let's not forget the balkanized republics of the Balkans. um, in the 90s,
Yo, I
Bosnia
gotta.
Herzegovina, they became.
It's like
Hold up,
it's like
bro.
1 in the morning
Just real
where I'm
quick.
at. I gotta bounce.
All right, man. Have a good one.
Yeah, let's wrap
Godspeed.
up
Yep.
generally.
It's been nice talking to you, gents.
Well, Gio, let's finish your statement and let's actually like start wrapping up.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Yeah, the problem with that is that the the seven republics in the Balkans came to a violent end, you know? So at this point, I think in America, we're in a situation where we have no choice but to be unified in a way for even this project to work. Um, if we don't have a unified, like even like the federal government regulating the commerce between the states in some way, it's just gonna be pure chaos because it's gonna turn into 50 states trying to figure out how to do business with 50 states, for example. Go ahead, Darth.
Yeah, I mean, we never really got into the concept of power as I thought we would, but I mean, this kind of like gets into it a little bit because it's like ultimately, it doesn't matter if we're balkanized or if we're one united country, because like this power group, like it exerts power beyond borders. It doesn't matter if you're like this, if you're like Poland or if you're in like America. Like these elites like go transnational. They go between like Davos in Switzerland and Washington D.C. and like L.A. and San Fran and like over to Berlin and Paris. Like I'm just kind of like randomly naming places that they operate, but like they don't have, they're not isolated to one country. They're not isolated to one region. They exert power all over through wealth, finance, and managerial bureaucracy, and like NGOs and other groups. So like just balkanization as a whole is like, well, unless you have like a list of them and you expedite them out and you have them like on a blacklist and like you have a secret police that makes sure that they never like get in or exert any influence in your tiny little micronation. I mean, theoretically that's possible, but in reality, like that's not really plausible. Like they're going to find a way to infiltrate your nation, to destroy it from within, even if you're like balkanized, if you're like, we're just going to secede. It's like that's, they will, the power will find a way to destroy your project if you were to attempt that. Geo, have anything?
Yeah, I mean, the conclusion that Plato, Polybius, John Adams developed his own iron law of oligarchy. Hitler had his Hitler cycle. Mickels had the iron law of oligarchy. Um, if you don't have your own elites defending your institutions, your traditions, your culture, your religion, and national reason, someone else's financial interests will take over. For example, South Korea's Joseon Dynasty ended in the 1890s when a group of Japanese businessmen were able to do business in South Korea under a forced treaty signed by South Korea because they had no choice because Japan was becoming the dominant regional power over the Chinese who had traditionally protected them against other interests. Um, and it got into a situation where a small group of Japanese businessmen were able to bribe every royal court member, every aristocrat, so much so that they were able to send a squad of Japanese militiamen to literally infiltrate to the heart of our capital, into our royal courts, to torture and desecrate our queen because she was anti-imperialist and anti-Japanese. They murdered her in her own court outside her bedroom, and pissed on her body and burned her body and shot her body. And what you're saying to me is that, we should have just, not had our country's interests defended, that we should leave it open to other imperialist or financial interests to do what they will in our country. And I would hope that all the examples in history where outside elites come in and dominate your area should be a lesson to be learned here rather than saying, no, we don't need elites at the top. I think the iron law of oligarchy states that there will always be natural aristocrats. I think a government should use the natural aristocrats of your country and put them to use rather than letting them become part of the cosmopolitan global elite or the transnational rootless elite. Otherwise, we're just allowing them to play that global game, that Game of Thrones that our country is refusing to play, essentially.
Yeah, and I mean, like the right does not try to cultivate these elites. Like it doesn't try to. It's never tried to have this like elite backing. It thinks it can just get like the yeoman farmer out every other year to vote, and that's like somehow good enough. Like no, like yeah, we need like if you were going to establish your own state, if you were going to balkanize, or if you're going to take over this regime, like remember, like you can't just like you need an elite to replace the current elite, and if you're not willing to like cultivate that elite, you're never going to have power. Like, or you're going to have like a Trump presidency where nothing's going to get done because you refuse to circulate the elites to your own men. So yeah, like, and I mean that's kind of like what Caesar's failing was as well. Like Caesar didn't circulate the elites in Rome. Like he kept his enemies around. Like he just thought, oh, we can just unite as Romans. It's like no, like you have to have a healthy friend-enemy distinction. Know who are your friends, who are your enemies. Keep your enemies out from any reigns of power. Purposely beat them down, keep them down, and put your friends in high places and in places of power. Like that's what you do if or when you ever get power. And that's like basic politics 101. Basic Carl Schmitt.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think on that we should kind of like end it off here. Joey, you want to say anything before we go?
No, I think that's a good place to end it right there. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in to this Dark Council. I know this is kind of like a more of a ramble, and we kind of went on a lot of tangents, but that's kind of all podcasts, and that's kind of where like the best thoughts come out. So, don't know when the next Dark Council is going to be. Just hit that bell. You'll get the notification. I hope to make this more frequent, but I have things going on in my life as well, as we all do. So, again, thank you all for joining us, and good night, everyone.